Ground-dwelling animals such as cattle and goats seek refuge at higher grounds in a flooded area in Namwala district. This rare and unprecedented scene, showing animals in desperate need of a safe haven, proclaims the devastating effects of climate change on livestock and agriculture in Zambia. These atrocious weather events are causing ferocious damage across the country. Intense heavy downpours are dumping a month's worth of rain in a few days in some parts of the country, such as Namwala and Monze, leading to floods that have swallowed huge tracts of land and farm fields. An area assessment done by government officials in Namwala with logistical support from the Zambia Air Force shows farm fields and crops submerged in water. Hundreds of houses have also been partially sunken by floods.
This is the manifestation of what climate change is, especially for this season. We started with a very serious dry spell. All the crops that the farmers had planted dried up, and from nowhere we have these heavy rains. So within one season, we are talking of a serious drought and a serious flood. So I think these are the true symptoms of a changing climate.
The Zambia Meteorological Department, MET, has attributed the flooding situation to the rain-bearing system, the Intertropical Convergence Zone, which has established itself in areas around Southern Province.
We have had a lot of areas, for example, receiving over 100 millimeters of rainfall in 24 hours, which is quite huge because those are some of the amounts some areas in Southern Province receive in a month, and you find that they have received that amount in 24 hours. So the results are flooding, flash floods, damage to infrastructure, damage to dams.
Zambia has in the 2021-2022 farming season experienced the extreme varying effects of changes in weather patterns and climate. At the start of the season, most parts of the country, especially the eastern half, recorded prolonged dry spells. The dry spells were influenced by increased temperatures and erratic distribution of rain.
What we have seen, especially during the October, November and December period of the season, is that the number of rain days was short. Even if we received significant amount of rainfall in those few rain days, most of that rainfall, because of elevated temperature, was lost to evaporation. And I'm saying those things because that's what impacts agricultural activities.
The trend of increased temperatures is not unusual, as it has largely been the same in the last 5 years. What is peculiar is that a number of areas are now recording more days with high temperatures compared to the same periods in the last 5 years.
We had more days recording very high temperatures compared to the same periods during the last 5 years. And what caused that was that generally during these periods we expect cloud cover. But because of the conditions that were prevailing, we had less cloud cover. And that meant that temperatures for most of the days were going to be elevated.
These adverse weather conditions are altering ecosystems, displacing animals, people, and casting a shadow of destruction on property and crops. Farmers across the country are among the most affected. And the Zambia National Farmers Union, ZNFU, has described the situation as a double tragedy.
Some farmers planted early, then went through a dry spell, the crop was lost, replanted in some areas. Then in other areas, they planted early, okay, the rains came early, they planted, and then we've had that experience where there are floods and flash floods. That's loss again of crop. So in areas like that, it's very, very difficult to plant. So double tragedy. So what happens now?
Some parts of Zambia are still experiencing floods. Residents of Namwala district spoken to have shared the impacts of the floods on their livelihoods.
Around midnight, we just heard a strange noise outside. Most of the families came out to realize that there was water all over. The area is flooded. As you can see in the fields here, all the maize have drowned in the waters.
People are homeless there. As you can see around, if you can cope from that side, All those houses in waters. Me, I'm just about a kilometer from here. My home actually was knee high. Water was in the house. Even the neighbors around, people slept in the bush where water could not reach. So we need an aid from whoever can do that, the government or whoever.
The spiral effects of floods on crops such as maize is related to at least 3 factors: the temperature of the water, the amount of water motion, and the duration of the flood. A climate change expert says floods are very damaging to crops and offers very little alternatives for recovery.
We do not have flood-tolerant varieties at the moment. For the floods, that is a bit difficult for agriculture because once floods come, they will definitely wash away everything that you have planted.
And Rolf Shenton, an agriculture conservationist of Grassroots Trust, an organization which promotes conservation and traditional agriculture, is saddened by the destructive effects of floods on soil nutrients.
We have been seeing more and more floods here around the country, big rivers flowing with brown water. Brown water means the soil from the fields is gone to Zambezi.
You cannot even replant, because where are you going to replant? The silting of the soil, there's a runoff of the soil, the water. It's very, very difficult. So those that find themselves in such circumstances, it's either you have alternative land, or if you don't have alternative land, it's very, very difficult to plant on silted land because it means that all the nutrients, all the top layer of the soil has been washed out.
Emmanuel Ndilovu, a Lusaka-based farmer, has had one of his fields flooded. Mr. Ndilovu says water swept through his fields and ran off with all the fertilizer that was applied. He incurred losses as he had to reapply fertilizer on his field.
So much rainfall, which causes floods. Our maize are always submerged in water because of these floods. And for that reason, you find that your yield becomes very low and very poor, which actually makes a farmer incur so many losses, because you have to go back to put in so much fertilizer in the field just to boost up the crop, to get it back to its normal growth stage. And that has actually affected so many farmers.
At the beginning of the 2021-2022 farming season, the country experienced delayed onset of rains. The situation caused panic among farmers across the country.
Those that planted early made some losses because they had to replant. So they made some expenditures that if the rains, if they had an idea that the rainfall pattern was going to delay a bit after that onset, the brief onset.
As a result of the prolonged dry spell that lasted for more than 10 days, fields dried up, crops wilted, and seed in the ground could not germinate as there was no adequate moisture in the soil. Crop expert and agronomist Kalaluka Muninda from the University of Zambia, Unza School of Agriculture prepared a detailed and analytical presentation regarding the impact of dry spells on crop performance. Dr. Muninda noted that prolonged dry spells contribute to low productivity in rain-fed agriculture because during such periods, crops suffer water stress that may ultimately result in low crop yields or total failure.
And then since there's less moisture, you have poor growth. And in the field, you have staggered growth. And then, like I said, the plants are stressed. They don't express their potential. And that results in lower production. And if this persists, particularly at flowering, that will cause a really drastic reduction in yield. At planting time, that is critical because you need the crop to emerge.
The Zambia National Farmers Union, ZNFU, says a lot of farmers were affected by the dry spell.
In areas such as parts of central, parts of eastern province, parts of Lusaka, and so on, farmers are planted early. We may not have an overall picture of what has really happened, but the majority of farmers that saw rains coming early had planted. And you see, for farmers, it rains once, twice, 3 times. at the time when they expect the rains to fall, then they see, okay, this is a signal, now we can move in and start planting, and they planted. They planted. Any farmer who knows his timing, that was a time to plant, and then the rains just disappeared.
Mr. Ndilovu is one of the many farmers whose field was affected by the prolonged dry spell. After noticing his crop wilting, he was forced to turn to irrigation.
It's very difficult because each and every plant relies on water, and the water is what makes the plants grow. My field is doing so great. I planted this crop in November. It is irrigated maize.
After noticing the evident impact of the extent of the dry spell and floods on some farmers in Southern Province, the Disaster Management and Mitigation Unit, DMMU, facilitated for a replanting exercise. The activity involved replanting of early maturing seed varieties. DMMU, however, did not respond to a request to discuss other interventions in place. The request also sought to ascertain how widespread the matter at hand is. In an attempt to understand the severity of the dry spell, which led to a lot of farmers replanting, we got to Koteva Agri-Science, one of the major manufacturers and suppliers of maize seeds. Koteva senior agronomist Kenon Mukuma says the demand of early maturing seeds has increased by 30% compared to the same period in the last 3 seasons.
The sales of the different varieties delayed in picking up. We saw because of the delayed rains, and then we saw the peak only in the second to the third week of December. And then this peak of demand of seeds, we saw it came with the demand of the early maturing varieties, right? So it's been different from the previous seasons. In the previous seasons, farmers would first plant the other maturing varieties, most of the farmers, and then end with the early maturing varieties.
Mr. Mukoma has also highlighted a new trend regarding the demand of early maturing seeds.
In the previous seasons, we would see much more demand of the early maturing varieties from Region 1, areas such as Southern Province. But for this season, the demand has come from across the country, even from Region 1 and Region 2. Farmers have been demanding for the early maturing varieties. The increase in the demand was about 20 to 30%. And as I had said, this increase really is coming from the other areas which usually do not demand the early maturing variety.
Dr. Moninda says one of the downsides of early maturing maize seed varieties is that they have a lower yield potential compared to the common late maturing variety.
Well, imagine the situation where there was no replanting, because in that case there would be very low yields. Because basically there was no crop to produce the yield that you want. But with the replanting, like we have seen, some maize has caught up. So although it is stressed, but it may yield about say 3 to 4 tons per hectare. But because that's not its potential, right? But the earlier ones, because they are maturing faster, right? And they take less time to grow, they will reach their potential. It will be, like I said, equivalent to about 3 to 4 tons per hectare. So it is better than having nothing.
The early maturing varieties, they yield lesser compared to the others because the time they would require to reach physiological maturity is less.
And ZNFU and other stakeholders are concerned that adverse weather conditions may affect food security at household level.
Definitely food security at household level is affected, is going to be affected for those that are living in areas that are flooded, and also to a large extent those that planted early and then had to replant. It means that their expenditures have gone up, It means they may not have a crop that they really anticipated, because some of them did not have money to replant. Some of them had money to replant and replanted. But if you look at crop anticipation or projection, they may not have as good a crop as they had anticipated to have earlier on.
Once you plant 1 month late, 15th of December, you're automatically going to lose 30%. Before anything else, just because of daylight hours, the days become shorter, during the growing season, and the temperature is cooler. So the plants don't grow as fast. So really, this year we're in trouble. A lot of people, I was in Chongwe last week, and very few people have maize which is ready for tasseling.
The Ministry of Agriculture was reached for input on the impact of the adverse weather conditions being experienced on projected crop yields and the spillover effects on the country's food security. The Ministry of Agriculture did not respond to an official request to discuss the aforesaid matter. However, Mr. Mukuma feels the replanting of early maturing maize seed varieties will not have any significant negative impact on projected yields. This is because early maturing seeds still promise a yield potential more than the national average, which is between 2 to 4 tons per hectare.
Most of the early maturing maize varieties, they're giving us a yield potential of about up to 8 tons per hectare. So with that, really the average yield per unit area of a farmer will not really change, because will not really change as long as the farmer is able to do the right things. If they are taking good care of the crop, they would get that. They would maintain that yield, or even get much better yield if they were to maintain, and then we would even see our national average yield increasing.
Dr. Chubamba, the climate change expert, says the unfavorable weather conditions that have been recorded this season are due to anthropogenic activities such as indiscriminate cutting down of trees. According to the Ministry of Green Economy and Environment, Zambia cuts down trees covering more than 300,000 hectares of land every year, making it one of the most deforested countries in the world.
At the moment, the science is unequivocal. It's very clear that the kind of change that we are seeing now is primarily due to human activities. What we do in the industries, what we do in the transportation sector, what we do in the agriculture sector. So all those greenhouse gases that we are emitting from the activities that we do in our economic area is what is causing this climate change now.
And the Zambia Meteorological Department, MET, also spoke on the role that human activities have on the changes in weather conditions.
When you burn fossil fuels, the end result, one of the products is carbon dioxide. And what carbon dioxide, if you continue putting carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, carbon dioxide acts as a blanket. It's like you are covering yourself. Because what happens is that when we receive energy from the sun, under ideal circumstances, we are supposed to emit it back into the universe. But because of the increase in the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, the carbon dioxide is trapping that energy in form of heat. So when that energy is trapped, it starts to increase the temperatures of the earth.
And Mr. Shenton feels mechanized agriculture methods are more harmful.
And let's redesign agriculture. Let's take all the knowledge that we have in traditional knowledge and mix it up with modern knowledge and come up with a thing which actually will work and will face climate change, will deal with climate change, to get off fertilizer, get off chemicals, and start that traditional farming, which is mixed cropping and using livestock to come in and produce manure. Just use what we have.
The technologies that we have in place, really, they are there to help us, to provide that food that is demanded by the increasing population. There are a lot of chemicals that are coming on board, which are environmentally friendly. I can give an example of some pesticides. Most of the pesticides that we are having now that are being approved, which are on the market, they're environmentally friendly, and they would see to it that even if we are using it in the crop to control some of the pests, it must not destroy those beneficial insects.
Dr. Muninda has also recommended crop rotation and diversification as one of the ways to respond to the adverse weather conditions such as dry spells. As the weather keeps changing, agriculture experts have hinted that investment in research activities is fundamental in developing climate-resilient crop varieties.
I would like to emphasize the need to test for what I'm climate smart compliant technologies. The university as a research institution can do that, so that what we give to farmers are those materials which are really drought tolerant, and also are tolerant to some of the pests and diseases which come about with the change in climatic environment.
Irrigation has also been considered as one of the options to curtail some of the effects of climate change, such as dry spells. Mr. Kalei and Dr. Chibamba have challenged government to ensure that they make irrigation equipment affordable, especially among small-scale farmers.
We entirely depend on the rains to irrigate our crops. If the rain does not show up, we do not have the well-developed irrigation systems that we can rely on. So that is where the impact now becomes more direct. If the rain does not come, then our harvest is going to be poor.
The replanting exercise embarked upon by many farmers has caused losses, as people had to spend on imports not budgeted for.
Start considering agriculture insurance in an advent of a force majeure, in an advent of an act of God, where there's a fire, where there's floods, and so on and so forth. You will be protected, and you will be hedged against such losses.
Zisk General Insurance has highlighted the importance of insurance in managing risks in agriculture.
When you just talk about the term insurance, you're really talking about indemnifying our clients who suffer losses. So even in agricultural terms, in the main, you see that our farmers will have two types of agricultural undertakings. It would be either the livestock that they're doing or the crops. So for us here at this General Insurance Limited, we have covers for both livestock and crops. So for farmers, if you're talking about crops, you're really talking about things like floods and droughts, even the damage that is caused by pests.
Research shows that most small-scale farmers are reluctant to take up insurance covers because of the perceived high cost.
Well, I haven't insured my crops, but I want to do so because it's very important. The general feeling of insurance being expensive is a feeling that every farmer out there or every individual has.
But Zisk General Insurance Managing Director Charles Nakoze says the benefit of insurance outweigh perceived concerns of the high cost of insurance covers.
We are still struggling to get the message across to the small-scale farmers who, like you're saying, will look at insurance from a perspective of cost. But if the two were to be related, one where you invest in growing crops, or in fact raising livestock without insurance, and the one who spends a little bit of their money to just buy insurance, you find that the advantage is the person who protects themselves against any potential calamity.
If the effects of climate change on agriculture are not managed, the consequences are ruthlessly clear. There will be less and less food. Stakeholders are thus urged to take more concrete actions and initiatives that are commensurate to the level of present and future challenges caused by adverse weather conditions. Everyone is being called upon not to take the vegetative majesty of our environment for granted, as it is not ours, but merely borrowed from future generations.